fades to black though.
Yeah.
So
you don't see him die
because
but you hear the military fire.
You know, it's supposed to be a true story. It's supposed to be a true story.
Fire.
So I think they do die there. I don't know.
Somebody
read the book. I don't know.
Book.
Get out Wiki.
Well, let's look at what Hillary has to say. Hillary on her website. This is why it's so important to know who these politicians are, because when you know Hillary for who she is, and the reason why they call her Killary or Hitlery, I kind of think of cutlery.
I know, me too.
But Hitlery.
Okay.
The reason why she has these names, and the entire article that I posted on sickbias.com called Clinton, the Body Count, which is dozens and dozens and dozens of... Anyways, on her website, she has an entire page dedicated to the court, warning all of her supporters that a Republican president could oversee a shift to the right. And this is quoting from her website. As many as 4 seats on the Supreme Court could become vacant during the next few years, which means that a Republican president could have the power to transform the court and American law for generations to come.
See, this is BS. Complete BS.
Hold on. That's why it's so terrifying when Ted Cruz says he would be willing to spend the capital to ensure that every Supreme Court nominee that Hillary, put on the court is a principled judicial conservative. Or no, not I as in I Hillary. I as in Ted. Sorry. Put a principled judicial conservative. But he's not alone. All of the Republican candidates for president are likely to appoint staunchly conservative justices.
And they should.
That's from Business Insider.
They should. Here's the thing that makes that article BS. There's no shift. The shift happened when Scalia died. If Scalia didn't die and we elected a conservative president in 2016 and he goes on to replace some of the liberal communists that are on the bench right now, what shift are we talking about? So the shift would be that we would win court cases 6-3 instead of 5-4. That's all it means,
right? But she's using the fear mongering. She uses
There's no shift.
But you wouldn't know that if you were a mind numbed drolt.
But the fact
drinks
that
her Kool-Aid,
a drolt. It's a dolt that drinks the Kool-Aid. Okay, all right. We coin a lot of phrases here, but we don't redefine existing phrases.
No, never.
That's what's most important.
Words have meaning.
Yeah. So now, for those of you who've been hearing this for years and years, we can't tip the balance. The entire Constitution is held by a thread, and it just sounds like hyperbole, fear-mongering, blah blah. Let me tell you something. It is a fact. We have lost the Constitution, and I will explain how the siege by the left will overturn anything that they want in the Constitution. And here's how.
Right.
District of Columbia versus Heller.
Ooh.
That's the one I sent to you.
Yes.
Okay, so D.C. versus Heller. Heller was a cop in D.C., and I think his name's Joe Heller. So Joe Heller was a cop in D.C. He went to work every day, donned his strap, his 9mm, and did his job every day. Went home, and he had to leave his gun at work. You are not allowed to possess a firearm in your own home, and he's a cop.
But this is he lives in D.C.?
Yeah.
Because the mayor of D.C., District of Columbia, it technically is not a state. It is a state amongst itself. I know there's 50 states in America. Technically, there's like 51 because D.C. is its own state, and they make their own rules.
You might be getting ahead of me on this. That you're talking about the dissent. What the dissent said.
No, I'm just saying. So D.C., when they say you're not allowed to have a gun in your house, they can do that and break. Well, they can't do that, but they have done it.
Right,
break
and
the Constitution. Right.
Well, so the cop said, "Whoa! This is BS. not only should I be allowed to have a gun because I am a cop, but we have this thing called the Second Amendment that specifically says that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Period. Right. You could talk about the precluding phraseology of that, which is that in order to secure a free state, a militia is required, and because of that, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So he went to court and said, hey, my Second Amendment rights, I should be allowed to protect my house with a gun and keep and bear arms, because that's what the Second Amendment says. So all these courts kept on saying, no, you don't, and it kept on going up.
How does that go past a half dozen courts?
Well, because their opinion is, yeah, sure, that's federal law. We don't care about that. We got our local law says you can't do it.
Right.
So then it goes up the court and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, so it gets all the way to the Supreme Court. And the argument was that the Second Amendment applies to people in each of the 50 states. And since D.C.
Yes.
is not a state, it doesn't apply to them.
It don't make no never mind.
Don't make no never mind in D.C. That was one of the dissents. The other dissent was that, well, it only applies to people who are currently in a militia.
No, they
yes, that was a dissent.
Oh, Lord. Well, could you say, well, I'm in my own militia. Oh, right. Now you're violating. We need to have drones hovering over your house. You and your militia.
So this was actually a group of people that sent this up. Shelley Parker, this is all part of this whole entire thing. Shelley Parker was a software engineer, former nurse who'd been active trying to rid her neighborhood of drugs. So she lived in a drug addict area or drug area. She was a single woman whose life had been threatened on numerous occasions by drug dealers who had sometimes tried to break into her house. And she argued I should be allowed to keep a gun. And she was told by the local authorities, no, you're not allowed to. Tom Palmer, colleague of Robert A. Levy at the Cato Institute, the only plaintiff that Levy knew before the case began. Palmer, who is gay, I love the way they put that in there because, there's like this block of gay people. They're like, no, Second Amendment bad, whatever, because of their liberal leanings. They said, well, let's throw this guy in there. He's gay. He defended himself with this happened. He defended himself with a 9mm handgun in 1982 while walking with a friend in San Jose, California. He was accosted by a gang of about 20 young men who used profane language regarding his sexual orientation and threatened his life. When he produced the handgun, the men fled. Palmer believes that the handgun saved his life. He didn't have to fire it.
No.
He just presented it. And the men were like, oh, damn, he's armed, and fled.
Right.
All right? Saved his life. Had he not had that, maybe he would have been beat down and possibly killed. So he was one of the plaintiffs here. A mortgage broker, Jillian Lawrence, who lives in Georgetown, the Georgetown section of D.C., he owns several legally registered long guns, which she uses for recreation in nearby Chantilly, Virginia. It had taken St. Lawrence 2 years to complete a registration. How is that possible? 2 years to complete a registration process?
Well, hold on. It doesn't registering and having a license to own a gun, doesn't that violate the Second Amendment?
Yeah, I would think. I personally would think.
To tell me that I have, I know somebody who owns guns, but they don't have paperwork on it.
Let's walk through this logically.
Hey, you got a license for that gun?
No, I got it.
I do.
Yeah, Second Amendment. Let's walk through this logically. Let's say, all right, listen, I'm the government. My argument is, yes, you guys do have the right to keep and bear arms. However, we really need you to register all these guns so that if something's stolen and then a crime is committed, it'd be really great for law enforcement if we could have this, so we're going to require you to do that. And then, of course, the public, maybe they listen to this argument and say, that sounds logical, that sounds good, let's do that. One guy comes along and says, you know what, I'm just not going to do that. Does he go to jail?
Oh, yeah, he goes to prison.
No.
Federal prison.
No.
Federal
pound you in the
prison.
Right.
Well, I say he'll go because the left will be like, we told you had to register.
We told you. And you agreed. But here's the problem.
And then he says Second Amendment, and this is what they say.
Nuts.
I remember when they said that. What is that from?
It's Chucky.
Oh, of course.
It's shit the liberals do to you.
Child's play. He's still laughing. He's going to die of laughter. All right, so here's where it all falls apart. You got to go through this logically. You can't guarantee somebody the right to keep and bear arms if you put any strings on it, because as soon as somebody comes along and says, I don't want that string, it becomes unconstitutional to say, well, therefore you're not allowed to keep and bear arms. Well, that's not what the Constitution says. It doesn't say that as long as you're registered, you can keep and bear arms. It says the right of the people shall not be infringed.
Not only that, but the other problem I have with this is that lists of names that the government has.
Oh, man, you going into the... I didn't bring my tinfoil hat with me.
No, you don't need one.
No, I know what you're saying.
That boy in high school hacked the head of the CIA's email.
Uh-huh.
If a boy in high school can hack the government's email...
But he's really bright, though.
Okay, well, he's homeschooled. So they can hack in and get lists of names. Who's to say that Hillary doesn't... Her email gets hacked by China or by ISIS. They get a list of gun owners in America, and they just start going one by one. Let's challenge them all.
I guess, yeah. See if you ever got registered or whatever. Right. I mean, that's obviously a concern. You don't want the government to have the ability to abuse power against the people. Another person, Tracy Ambro. Oh, Tracy Hansen is her name now. An employee of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, originally from St. Gabriel, Louisiana. She lives in the Adams Morgan neighborhood of D.C. with her husband, who is from Waterloo, Iowa. They lived in a high-crime neighborhood, which, of course, it's D.C.
Always, right. Well,
near Union Station in D.C. She grew up around guns and wanted one to defend her home. That's all it says about her.
Right.
So she was one of the plaintiffs against this. Now, here's Dick Heller. Oh, Dick. I thought it was Joe. Dick Heller, a licensed special police officer for the District of Columbia. His job, Heller carried a gun in federal office buildings, but was not allowed to have one in his home. Heller had lived in Southeast DC near the Kentucky Courts Public Housing Complex since 1970, and he had seen the neighborhood, quote, transformed from a child-friendly welfare complex to a drug haven, of course.
That's how it always goes.
Unquote. Heller also approached the National Rifle Association about a lawsuit to overturn the D.C. gun ban, but the NRA declined, that's pretty disappointing.
I don't know. There has to be other things behind that, why the NRA would decline.
Yeah, but guess what? This went all the way up to the Supreme Court. So Justice Henderson, he said, no, I'm going to dissent, and here's why. To sum it up, there is no dispute that the Constitution, case law, and applicable statutes all establish the district is not a state within the meaning of the Second Amendment under United States versus Miller, 307 U.S. at 178. The Second Amendment's declaration and guarantee that, quote, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, unquote, relates to the militia of the states only.
You know what?
That the Second Amendment does not apply to the district, then, is, to me, an unavoidable conclusion. Let me tell you something. Scalia said this. Scalia said, you know what? I don't have to hate people that I think are too stupid to know the correct answers from wrong answers. That's paraphrasing, but that's
right.
So he's friends with these, like Henderson, Justice Henderson,
Right.
with this dissent.
He was friends with